Posterity, you call me an enigma, a name buried beneath the ash of history. And yet I hear the whispers of your scholars. Pupienus Maximus, co-emperor of Rome, who reigned for a fleeting moment in the year of the 6 emperors. What did he leave behind? Allow me to speak for myself, not as a forgotten marble effigy, but as a man of flesh and bone who carried the crushing weight of the laurel wreath. In my time, I was both hailed and despised, but you, my future audience, deserve the truth, one I swore to uphold until my dying breath. Before the swords, the betrayals, and the Senate's schemes, there was merely a boy named Pupienus. I was born in 164 AD in the bustling town of Alba Pompeia, nestled in the foothills of the Ligurian Alps. My father was a modest provincial magistrate, a man of unyielding discipline who believed in Rome's sacred virtues, pietas, dignitas, and gravitas. My mother, a woman of patrician stock, tempered his sternness with a love of literature and philosophy. It was from her that I first heard the stirring speeches of Cicero and the epics of Virgil. Though our household was humble compared to the palatial estates of Rome's elites, it was rich in the ideals of family and duty. My childhood was a training ground for resilience. My father demanded excellence, and so I excelled. At dawn, I learned to wield a wooden gladius against my brothers. By dusk, I pored over scrolls of Livy's histories and Pythagoras' geometries. I was not a prodigy, but I was determined. And determination, as you will come to see, is as much a weapon as a blade. I grew up alongside 3 siblings, each of us bound tightly by the invisible threads of familial loyalty. My elder brother, Quintus, taught me strategy through endless games of ludus latruncalorum, our version of chess, while my sister, Livia, ensured my mind stayed sharp with her relentless debates. But it was my youngest brother, Tiberius, who inspired me most. He lacked my physical strength, but possessed an uncanny wit and unshakable moral compass. I vowed to defend him at all costs, a promise that would later haunt me when I failed to protect him from Rome's ravenous politics. From an early age, I felt the magnetic pull of destiny. Whether it was the pride in my father's eyes when I bested him in an argument, or the thrill of standing on the Capitoline Hill during a rare family trip to Rome, I knew I was meant for something beyond the provincial life. My mother, ever the oracle, once said, "Marcus, you are as the Tiber steadfast, winding but destined for Rome." How prescient she was! Yet destiny is not a smooth road, but a treacherous climb. As you will soon see, my ascent to the imperial throne was neither straightforward nor without cost. The fires of ambition forged me, but they also scorched those I loved most. Stay with me, and I will recount how a magistrate's son from the provinces rose to share the purple robe of emperors. I will tell you of alliances, betrayals, and the fleeting triumphs that defined my reign. I will show you the truth behind my name. But before we delve into my rise to power, let us linger for a moment in the innocence of Alba Pompeia. There, in the shadow of the mountains, I learned that family is both a fortress and a battlefield, and that Rome, for all its grandeur, is no different. My rise to the imperial throne was not born of birthright nor prophecy. I was no scion of ancient patrician bloodlines, nor did I carry the blessings of an emperor's favour. What I had was grit, a tireless work ethic, and the ability to navigate Rome's turbulent waters with tact and force when required. If I had known that ambition would lead me to the peak of power and the precipice of death, would I have walked this path? I cannot say. What I can tell you is how it began. Rome in the late 2nd century was a furnace of opportunity and peril. The empire stretched from Britannia's icy shores to the scorched sands of Egypt. But within its heart, the Senate seethed with ambition, the legions with unrest, and the provinces with rebellion. My first steps into public life were cautious but determined, driven by a belief in Rome's enduring greatness. I entered the magistracy under Emperor Commodus, a volatile ruler whose indulgences threatened to unravel the empire. I kept my head low, my judgments fair, and my alliances shrewd. As praetor and later consul, I earned a reputation for integrity, which was rare in an age of greed. The people of Rome, weary of corruption, called me the honest Pupienus. I was honoured, though I knew honesty alone would never carry me far in a city where daggers were drawn in the shadows. My military career followed a necessity for any man with ambitions of power. It was here, in the unforgiving heat of the frontiers, that I forged my legacy as a leader. My campaigns in Germania were grueling but transformative, leading Rome's legions against fierce barbarian tribes. I learned the art of war and the price of command. Victory came not from brute strength, but from strategy, discipline, and the respect of the soldiers who followed me. They called me a man of the camp, one who shared their hardships, dined at their fires, and held firm when others faltered. These years taught me that true power lay not in the Senate chambers, but in the loyalty of those who wielded the sword. But military accolades were not enough to shield me from Rome's political machinations. When Emperor Severus Alexander fell to the treachery of his own soldiers, the empire spiraled into chaos. The Gordian rebellion erupted in Africa, with the aged Gordian Thame and his son declaring themselves emperors against the tyrant Maximinus Thrax. The Senate, desperate to reclaim its waning authority, supported them, but their rebellion ended in bloodshed within weeks. It was then, amidst the power vacuum, that my name was thrust forward. I was old by Roman standards, 74, but my age, once a disadvantage, now served as proof of my wisdom and stability. The Senate elected me alongside Balbinus as co-emperor, hoping to stabilise the empire with a balance of military prowess and administrative experience. Together, we were to rule as a unified front against Maximinus, but the cracks in this arrangement were visible from the start. Balbinus and I were as different as fire and ice he, the aristocrat with a distaste for the legions, I, the soldier who understood the necessity of military power. The moment I donned the purple robe, I felt its weight. The laurels brought not triumph, but a crown of thorns. Rome's streets were a cauldron of unrest, its provinces fractured, its people hungry for justice. The Senate hoped to present us as saviours, but the legions remained sceptical, loyal only to their generals. How could we hope to unite such a divided empire? That question would haunt my brief reign, but I could not dwell on it then. Maximinus marched on Rome, and we had little time to prepare. The road to the throne was paved with ambition, alliances, and blood. Yet, even as I sat in the heart of Roman power, I felt the fissures of betrayal and distrust beneath me. I had climbed the mountain, but the summit was unstable. Stay with me, and I will reveal how the battle for Rome's soul unfolded, how our reign compared to the shadow of Maximinus's tyranny, and how we fought to save an empire already tearing itself apart. To rule is to walk a knife's edge. With each step, I felt the blade beneath my feet threatening to cut me down. In those fateful months of 238 AD, Balbinus and I shared the throne, yet we did not share trust. While we squabbled over strategy and authority, Maximinus Thrax, the so-called Thracian giant, loomed on the horizon like a storm. His reign had been marked by cruelty, a despot who crushed opposition beneath the weight of his legions. But even in his tyranny, he had a singular clarity. Power flowed from the military, not the Senate. It was a lesson Balbinus refused to accept, and one that would prove our undoing. Maximinus advanced on Rome with his army, and the Senate scrambled to defend the city. I, the man of the camp, was tasked with rallying the legions. Balbinus, meanwhile, remained in the capital, presiding over the Senate's debates and Rome's restless mobs. His disdain for the soldiers was palpable, and they, in turn, resented him. I sought to bridge this chasm, but our partnership was fragile. The people saw us not as saviours, but as two old men bickering in the face of an existential threat, and yet there was a moment of hope. Maximinus's siege of Aquileia stalled, his army bogged down by resistance and lack of supplies. News of his assassination, at the hands of his own men, reached us like a lightning bolt. The tyrant was dead, his threat extinguished. Balbinus and I celebrated, but our victory was hollow. The Senate declared us heroes, yet the streets of Rome boiled with discontent. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor makers and breakers, saw us not as rulers, but as obstacles to their own power. Maximinus ruled by fear, a brutal force of nature who cowed even his enemies. In contrast, our reign was fraught with uncertainty, our authority undermined by the very institutions that had placed us on the throne. What had truly changed? The tyrant was gone, but Rome's fractures remained. The Senate regained its voice, but its influence was weak beyond the city walls. The provinces simmered with rebellion, and the legions, weary of civil war, cared little for the ideals of stability or justice. And then there was young Gordian III, a boy of 13, hailed by the people as a symbol of hope and renewal. The Senate, ever shrewd, elevated him as Caesar, the heir apparent to balance our rule. Balbinus supported the move, hoping to placate the mob. I, however, saw the writing on the wall. A child ruler, beloved by the masses and the guard, was a double-edged sword. In the eyes of the soldiers, he was preferable to two aging emperors squabbling over authority. I feared he would become their pawn, and my fears were justified. The seeds of betrayal were sown long before the harvest. Even as we celebrated our triumph over Maximinus, the Praetorian Guard conspired against us. They did not see two rulers united in purpose. They saw weakness, division, and an opportunity to reclaim their dominance. Balbinus and I had inherited the throne, but we had not earned the legion's loyalty. And in Rome, power without the support of the sword is no power at all. The reign of Maximinus had been harsh, but it had been clear. He ruled through strength, an iron fist that brooked no dissent. In contrast, our reign was muddled an attempt at balance that pleased no one. Yet, even as the cracks in our rule deepened, I clung to hope. Perhaps, I thought, Rome could yet find peace under shared leadership. I could not have been more wrong. The events that followed would seal my fate and lay bare the harsh truths of Roman politics. Stay with me, for in the next part I will recount the moment when power turned to peril, when the very forces that had placed the laurel wreath upon my brow conspired to remove it. In death, I would come to understand the true cost of ambition. But let us not rush to that grim conclusion. First, we must face the storm that engulfed Rome and the betrayal that ended my reign. Betrayal does not strike like a thunderbolt. It festers unseen, a wound beneath the skin. By the time I realised the extent of our peril, it was already too late. The Praetorian Guard, whose loyalty Balbinus and I so desperately needed, had grown restless. Their disdain for us was no secret, but we underestimated the depth of their ambitions and their willingness to act on them. It was July, the sweltering summer air thick with tension. Rome was restless, its streets alive with murmurs of discontent. Balbinus and I attempted to placate the mobs, but we ruled as two men with separate minds, not a unified front. Our joint rule, meant to stabilise the empire, had only deepened its fractures. The Senate, the people, the legions, each had their own expectations of us, and we failed to meet any of them. The Praetorian Guard, however, had no patience for failure. They saw us as obstacles to their power, relics of a Senate that no longer held sway. They cast their gaze instead upon the young Gordian III, the boy Caesar, who represented a pliable figurehead through whom they could rule. And so, in their barracks, they plotted. The night they struck, I was in my residence, poring over reports of unrest in the provinces. A messenger arrived, pale and trembling, with news that the guard had entered the palace under the guise of delivering an urgent communique. Balbinus was in the audience chamber, unaware of their treachery. I had little time to act, but what could I do? The guard outnumbered and outmatched any force I could muster within the city. They were an unstoppable tide, and we were but two old men trying to hold back the sea. I rushed to the palace, hoping to rally what few loyal guardsmen remained, but chaos reigned. The Praetorians moved with brutal efficiency, dragging Balbinus from the chamber before I could reach him. They found me in the corridor, surrounded by my attendants. There was no time for words or pleas. The moment they laid their hands on me, I knew my fate was sealed. They brought us both into the street, the jeering mob a stark contrast to the quiet dignity of our earlier acclamations. There was no trial, no ceremony, only the swift execution of their plans. As the swords rose above us, I thought not of the crown nor the empire, but of the journey that had brought me here, the sacrifices, the triumphs, and the bitter ironies. I had risen from the provinces, fought for Rome's glory, and worn the purple robe, only to meet my end as a victim of its endless cycle of power and betrayal. The blade fell, and with it, so too did the illusion of our rule. Balbinus and I were dead, our bodies discarded as the mob turned its adoration toward the boy emperor. Gordian III was hailed as Rome's new hope, his youth and innocence a stark contrast to our perceived failures. And yet, I could not help but wonder, how long before he, too, would feel the bite of betrayal? Though my life ended in violence, it was not in vain. My death, like my reign, was a reflection of the forces that shaped Rome, forces as timeless as ambition, loyalty, and the thirst for power. But was it worth it? Could my fleeting time on the throne have made any lasting impact? These questions linger, and I will address them in the next chapter as we explore the legacy I left behind. For even in death, a life lived for Rome is never truly forgotten. Stay with me, for my story is not yet finished. In the shadows of my reign, you will find lessons as enduring as the eternal city itself. History has a cruel way of reducing a man to a mere line in a chronicle. Pupienus Maximus, co-emperor of Rome, reigned 3 months, assassinated by the Praetorian Guard. But is that all I was? A name forgotten, a reign dismissed as inconsequential? I say no. My legacy, though shrouded in the brevity of my rule, lies in the lessons I leave to those who study Rome's eternal struggle for balance between power and principle, ambition and restraint, the sword and the law. In my lifetime, I was seen as a stabilizing force, a man of discipline and integrity amid the chaos of the year of the 6 emperors. I rose from the provinces, earning my place through merit, not lineage, a rarity in Rome's rigid hierarchy. My very existence as emperor challenged the notion that only the elite could ascend to the purple. For a fleeting moment, I stood as a symbol of what Rome could be, a meritocracy where the virtues of discipline, courage, and justice outweighed birthright. My military career, though overshadowed by my brief reign, was one of genuine accomplishment. I fought not for personal glory, but for Rome's survival. My campaigns in Germania were not just battles, but lessons in leadership. I knew the value of the soldier's loyalty, the strength of shared hardship, and the power of unity. These were principles I carried into my reign, even as the political divisions of Rome rendered them difficult to implement. Yet my greatest legacy may lie not in what I achieved, but in what I failed to accomplish. My co-rule with Balbinus exposed the flaws of divided leadership, the fragility of Senate authority, and the dangers of neglecting the loyalty of the legions. These failures were not unique to us. They were woven into the fabric of Rome's political system. But by confronting them, even imperfectly, we illuminated the need for reform. What of Rome's people? Though our reign was brief, I like to believe we gave them a glimpse of hope. By elevating Gordian III as Caesar, we sought to heal the wounds of a fractured empire. His ascension, though orchestrated by the Guard, symbolized renewal. Perhaps our sacrifice served as a warning to those who followed, a reminder that Rome's strength lay not in its emperors, but in its unity. And what of you, my audience, who now reflect upon my life from the distant future? My legacy, I hope, is a call to action. Learn from Rome's triumphs and failures. Understand the cost of ambition untempered by compassion, and the necessity of leadership grounded in integrity. The story of my life is not one of personal glory, but of a man striving, however imperfectly, to serve a greater purpose. But was it enough? That question lingers, and it will carry us into the final chapter. There, I will reflect on the worth of my reign and the enduring values of equality, freedom, and democracy. My story, though ended by the blade, may yet inspire those who seek to understand Rome's legacy and their own role in shaping a better world. Stay with me, for even in the silence of history, my voice has much left to say. Was my reign worth it? A question not easily answered, even from the perspective of death. When the sword fell upon me, I could not have imagined that centuries later, voices like yours would still ponder my life and reign. History, after all, is less kind to those whose moments of power are fleeting. And yet, the value of a reign is not measured solely in its length, but in the ideals it upholds, the struggles it reveals, and the lessons it imparts. I ruled briefly and poorly, some might say, but I contend that my reign, fragmented, chaotic, and ultimately tragic, was a reflection of Rome itself. Our empire was mighty but fractured, gilded yet corroded at its core. My co-rule with Balbinus, though flawed, sought to balance opposing forces: military strength and senatorial authority, old traditions and new realities. We were not wholly successful, but we were not wholly wrong either. At its heart, my reign was an affirmation of the values I hold dearest: equality, freedom, liberty, and democracy. I came from humble beginnings in the provinces, and my rise was not one of privilege, but of merit. My life demonstrated that Rome was more than its patrician elite, that a soldier, a magistrate, a man of the people could aspire to the highest office. Though my death came at the hands of the Praetorian Guard, I know that my life served as a reminder that Rome belonged not just to emperors, but to all who lived under its banner. Equality is not easily found in an empire ruled by autocrats, but I believed in a vision of Rome where justice was impartial and merit was rewarded. Freedom and liberty, too, were fragile ideals in my time, often overshadowed by the tyranny of strongmen like Maximinus Thrax. Yet, even in our brief reign, Balbinus and I sought to restore a sense of balance, to temper Rome's reliance on force with the wisdom of governance. These ideals were seeds planted in rocky soil, but they were worth planting nonetheless. And democracy. How does one speak of democracy in the context of an empire? Rome was no republic in my time, yet the Senate's voice, though diminished, still echoed the principles of shared governance. I fought to preserve that voice, even as others sought to silence it. I see now that Rome's future depended not on any one man, but on the strength of its institutions and the unity of its people. My reign may have faltered, but the ideals I stood for remain eternal. To you, my audience in the distant future, I leave this. The story of my life is not one of triumph, but of striving. Striving to hold together a fractured empire. Striving to uphold values that outlasted me. Striving to remind the world that power is fleeting, but principles endure. Should you wish to walk where I once stood, let me guide you. Begin in Rome, at the Capitoline Hill, where the Senate once convened, and my reign was forged in compromise and hope. Visit the ruins of Aquileia, where Maximinus's siege faltered, and the tides of history shifted. Venture north to Alba Pompeia, my birthplace, nestled in the Ligurian Alps. There, among its ancient streets, you will find echoes of my humble beginnings. And now, I must thank you for joining me on this journey. As you reflect on my life and the lessons of Rome, I invite you to continue exploring. Our channel, Renaissance Spirit, is dedicated to the pursuit of a just, equitable, and humanitarian world. We delve into history, politics, religion, culture, and the liberal arts to uncover truths that illuminate our shared humanity. The Renaissance Spirit is more than a philosophy. It is a way of living, learning, and growing. Through knowledge and compassion, we can become better stewards of the earth and each other. Please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share your thoughts. Let us know what inspires you and what other stories you'd like to hear. And before you go, take the quiz to see if you too are a Renaissance spirit. Vive Renaissance Spiritus. History is not dead. It breathes in our understanding and our actions. And through it, we honor the past and shape the future.